Hi, Ruthie.
Hey, I feel like every time I see you, I'm like out of the water and I have like this beach boho hair that's happening. I was like, whatever, it's natural.
Great
How
to
are
see you
you?
again.
Yes, it's good to see you too. How are you?
I'm good,
How are you?
thanks. You said you were just in the water?
Yeah, swimming. We had went for a swim this
Oh,
morning.
okay.
Oh, hold on, there's something going on. Let me see.
Yep,
Hmm. So the internet is acting funny. Shouldn't be. Can you hear me?
I can hear you fine, yeah.
Oh, okay, good. All right. All right, then it should be fine.
Okay. I just want to say right off the bat, thank you, Green, for agreeing to come back to share your story. Um, it's one
So
of
nice turn.
yeah, it's one of determination, courage, and it needs to be heard. So I just want to say thank you.
No problem. I
Uh,
understand what it's like when you have technology flops.
oh yeah, yes. Um, so not only that, it's also important for other people to hear these stories. It can be empowering just as much as it can be rewarding and cathartic for those sharing them. So I just want to say welcome back, Ruthie.
Well, thank you. I'm glad we are getting it recorded.
Absolutely.
That's awesome. How are
So let's
you?
um, just to give a little background here. Ruthie and I met at the Rose City Triathlon. I guess it was a couple weeks ago now.
Yep.
And you told me something incredible. You said it was your first triathlon.
Yes.
So not only did you decide to do your first triathlon, you chose to jump into the long course distance, which for those who are unfamiliar with the sport, it's between an Olympic and a half iron distance. And Ruthie, you crushed it.
Yeah. Kind of jump in with no water wings on.
Oh, it was incredible.
Yeah, it was an amazing day. And it was the people when I signed up for it, they were like, there's a lot of people that were like, well, you did what? The which course? They're like, you do realize there's a process. You do the sprint, and then you try the Olympic, and then you do the long course, and then you can go on to the Ironman. I was like, yeah, no. I was, I was like, it's 4 hours. The longest one is 4 hours. I can do anything in 4 hours. But yeah, it was a very amazing race, and for a first triathlon, like I can't complain. There was so many moments of that race that just that you can't make those happen. They were serendipitous. And to start something and to jump into something when you're learning at the same time takes a lot of courage. But I felt supported by the people that were at that race the whole way through. And I think that that's the beauty of endurance racing. And I honestly think it's the community too of the people that were there. Because yeah, I've done some races in some other sports, like road running and stuff like that. And again, this race is like going to this race as my first one was something pretty magical. Why I signed up for the second one.
And not only that, I think the venue also lent itself to great spectator involvement because everything was kind of around the stands at all. The
Yeah,
swim was easily visible. The run was around the course. The bike was not visible, but for the most part, the spectators were part of it.
100%. And like, which was good. I had some friends that were there that were cheering on that I didn't even know were going to show up, which I was grateful for. But again, I think I mentioned this maybe in passing to you, but it was the people on the course that I met that were real game changers for me in the race. Like I had agreed to sign up for this and I'd been training with a club for a while. Like a while, I mean like maybe 3 weeks before. Let's be honest about that part. I only got the bike fitting for Welland like a couple of days before. So my bike, when I was training with it, it didn't ever really fit. And I kept falling off of it. I got injured. Like I have a bump on my elbow that still is, I don't know what it is, but it's like 8 weeks old now. And it's still, I fell, the back tire of my bike came off because I didn't know how to put the tire on right. I was going up a hill and fell off. I mean, you learn these things as you go. And it was just a really fast learning curve. But when I was on the course, it was like, you know, trial by fire. Like I jumped into that course and got through the swim, got onto the bike. And I think I told the story maybe in passing again, but there was this moment on the bike where there was like 4 ladies in a row and I was the second one. And I had been watching because I'd never raced with people. And you have to understand that we have group bike rides, but I always got dropped because I didn't know how to ride my bike, right? So I'd never ridden with more than myself. So I'm like singing songs in my head as I'm riding, but I'm watching the etiquette of a bike race because I'd never seen that before. So I'm watching them pass each other and I'm noticing, well, they're talking and they're saying and they're yelling things at each other. So I was like listening to like the direction they would call out left, and then they would come and they'd move around the person and then cycle to pass them, right? So I was like, okay, I can do this. I'm ready to try this. Let's do this. So I went and I tried to go around the first lady and I said, left at the top of my lungs. And, you know, I went around her and then all of a sudden this other woman comes riding right by me and like out of nowhere and starts like yelling at me. So like, I'm like pulling up to the front of the chain of 4 of us now. And the lady that had like come up behind was really, really upset. She yelled some profanities at me. And I was like apologizing. I was like, I'm so sorry. I don't know what I did. I'm so sorry. I'm so sorry. And she's like, what were you thinking? And anyways, the ladies behind, one of them sped up and came and said left and came around to me. And she's like, you did nothing wrong. And I was like, well, I could have because I've never ridden a bike with anybody. And like, this is my first race. And it totally could have been on me. She's like, no, we watched you. We were right behind you. You did nothing wrong. You're doing an amazing race. Like, keep going. Don't let her get to you. Like, they were just the kindest humans. And then when we were on the run part, because the run you did loops around, so you passed people, right? And those ladies off the bike came up again while we were running and were like, Ruthie, you're doing an awesome job. And like, just so encouraging. And they all even came back after the race just to make sure I understood that I was doing nothing wrong on the bike, which was, you know, so kind when you're learning something for the first time to have those types of people that just reaffirm what you're doing and they just go out of their way to make it a positive experience when you're like doing something for the first time, which was like one of those moments from the race that I was like so grateful for, because like I would have gone away from that race thinking, oh man, you've got to learn bike etiquette and like stay away from fast people or like don't pass. Like I was honestly scared to pass people going into that race. So like without people and these like veterans coming up and telling you these things, like you don't know, right? And it makes you want to come back when you have people that just take that moment of kindness to just, you know, invest in your race as well as racing theirs. So yeah, so I mean there was that, and then there was Alistair. Alistair was the one on the run. He was such a serendipitous story. We come to like the last 1K and I was hurting on the run, like there, I started off puking my guts out. And I met some guy at the first aid station who is such a sweetheart and gave me watermelon. But like that run section, and I'm a runner, so it was even more demoralizing to be like, why are my legs not working? Why is this all falling apart? And the last kilometer, this guy was like happy-go-lucky, and he said something to another runner, trying to encourage him. And he caught up to me. He's like, you still seem like you got legs in you or something like that. I forget what he had said, but we ended up running the last kilometer and just talking. He's like, so what number is this for you? And I'm like, this is my first. He's like, what? I was like, yeah, my first. I was like, I was in treatment 3 weeks ago and I thought this was a great life choice because I had nothing better to do, and the story that my life was in and my health was in sucked. So I said to myself, why not sign up for a triathlon? You've been trying to practice this. You got to jump in and figure out how you're going to like train for this. So you might as well understand what a race is. So I said, yes. And he was like, so like speechless at this point that he's like, do you mind if I race you to the end? He's like, I hope I can keep up with you. I was like, no, 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 no. You just keep talking and we'll get to the end, because right now I want to stop every 5 seconds. So he just kept talking. We got to the end, and like right before the finish line, he's like, okay, here's what you need to do. He's like, there's the finish line. It's up this little hill. He's like, you got to give her and make it look good. He's like, so I'm going to like stay behind and let you go. So like I raced over the finish line and turned around, and he was standing right there at the finish line, which is lovely. And like I gave him a hug and thanked him. But it turned out, this is the funny part. Afterwards, I got a message from a mutual friend of ours, and she's just like, you two are both teachers. You do know that. She's like, you two follow each other in your PLN on Twitter. And it turned out that Alistair was actually a teacher from another board. And she was just like, she's like, out of all the races and all the places in this world for you two to find each other, it would be on a triathlon, on a run course. She's just like, you two are the most kindest, awesomest humans in education. And to find each other in the triathlon world, like, it was just meant to be. So like all of those things. And Alistair kept sending me messages about like training and about like just encouraging like after the race. And it was you and Alistair that were like having these conversations about like doing more. And then seeing you at Muskoka, I was like, why not? I need to sign up for an Ironman next. So that's in like 4 weeks. But it's because you see some of these people doing like crazy, awesome, courageous things with their life that you give them permission to try it out in their own. And that's kind of, I think, the beauty of social media and these races and things, is that it's not about some days or one days. It's about just jumping in and being courageous together. And like, that was just it. When Ironman decided that they were going to redo the race and it opened up, I was like, this is the universe saying yes. I was like, jump in, Ruthie, jump in. So because of you guys, I'm going to try the first half Ironman in 4 weeks.
That's incredible.
Yeah, it will
incredible.
be. But yeah.
So you and I have talked about this before. Maybe you'd like to share with other people how like your background as a runner.
Yeah. Okay, that's a funny story. So I got into running a couple weeks after having my second child, Max. We lived in a condo downtown, and this is maybe if Max ever listens to this or watches this, know that your mother loves you. However, being a young mother downtown Toronto with 2 kids was a lot, and I was going through postpartum or something. And I remember calling up Dave and saying, if you don't get home right now, I'm going to put this baby down the garbage chute because I can't stand the crying. Can't stand it at all. So, of course, he came home. And I remember just grabbing shoes and telling myself I'm going to go for a run. Like, I just need to get my sanity back, right? And chase after it. So I went for a walk run. I think it was just a kilometer. And while I was gone, I realized that I had total privacy and independence to myself, which was magical. And I realized that if I go for longer distances, then I have more me time. So 1 kilometer turned into 5 the next day, which turned into, and it just kept going. And I was just like, this is great. No children, no crying, no nothing. And it was like a couple weeks later, I signed up for Scotiabank, the 5K, because I was like, it'll be a whole like half an hour, 45 minutes or whatever to myself, and that there'll be no babies and I can just be me. And I remember racing, and I think the first couple times I went running, I had Converse on. Like, I knew nothing. Like, I didn't know anything about technical wear or anything. It was just like, what do I have? And just get me out of here. And so my running really started out of desperation. And it started on the roads. We lived downtown, so it was down by Lakeshore. And then I got into trail running shortly thereafter. And it was because of my friend John, who he kind of encouraged me to expand my 21K distance, or my 30K, because I also did around the bay, into the trails. And again, trial by fire. We signed up for a 54 ultra, first ultra at Christie Lakes with Happy Trails. And I got to the end of that and I was like, I could do 100. So it's like every time like I've gotten into something, it just kind of like balloons and catapults into like, what's next? What can I do next? Like a bit more. So getting into triathlons was I had a running background was part of that. I think the other part was I got into swimming in January because my girlfriend Becky, like she's my best friend, she swam across. She was the first Chinese Canadian last year to swim across Lake Erie in a solo swim, and she did it because she wanted to raise money for Jumpstart Canada and Girls in Sports programs and raise awareness to females in female athletes and female in sports programs. She had twin daughters over COVID, and there was no, in their high school, there was no phys ed for them. So Jumpstart turned around and said, well, if your girls want to get into sports, we'll fund whatever they want. And like Becky's girls got into cheerleading and bull riding, like crazy sports, right? Like, but Becky was like, I got to like raise money and support for this organization because they've given back to my daughter. So she decided to do this swim, and Becky wasn't a swimmer. Becky could not tread water. So like she could freeze down front crawl, but every time we had to give her nutrition, she's like, hurry up. She's like, I can't like sit here forever. And anyway, so she made the swim and she did it awesome. And then she finished that and was like, let's do Lake Ontario. And while I had crewed her and even jumped in the water at some points because there was like a storm rolling in when she was doing Yuri and they were going to pull her. And they were like, she's tired and she looks like she's going to throw up. So I jumped in the water, which I never swam in open water or without like fins and a snorkel. So I jumped into the water and Becky's like, you're going to drown. And I was like, yeah, but you look like a mermaid. So we're going to roll this out. They're going to look at how bad I look with fresh legs and drowning. And they're going to think you look amazing. So let's just keep going until we get to this end, right? So I told her that if we're doing Lake Ontario, I can't do that again. And I got to be a little bit more aware of what it takes to be a swimmer. So I got into the pool in January and started to learn how to swim and really take apart swimming in case I would need it for this project, right? So my swimming really like developed as a part of desperation to help a project of people not like get hurt or injured or die. So I was like, when we got to the bike part, I was like, can't be that hard. I've ridden a bike before, but triathlon bikes, totally different beasts. But slowly but surely I am like training with the club and learning the three sports and how to put them all together. So yeah, I did have a background in some other like running and whatnot, but it's not like, I think that each of these are different and I'm learning how to kind of see the overlap and who you are as an athlete and how some of those strengths can be applied to the three different sports. Does that make sense?
Absolutely. Now we were talking about one of your favorite runs. Maybe you'd like to give a little bit about that.
Yeah. Oh, definitely. So I got into trail running actually, and it's a trail running race. When COVID hit, I was diagnosed with cancer at the beginning of it. And it was hard because you got cut off from everything. And I think I mentioned a couple minutes ago about how I went for my first ultra and we did 54K with Happy Trails. And my guy friends turned around and we got to the end. We were like, let's do 100. However, COVID hit. And then I was diagnosed with cancer and I was in limbo waiting for biopsies. And they, all my races got canceled and I couldn't be around people. And my guy friends just turned around and said, okay, give me your races. And we're going to go and do an ish version of it and go have some other epic adventures up on the Bruce Trail. So one of our friends, John Toes, was doing a Hike for Mental Health series. And he's like, why don't we run the Bruce Trail and we'll go and do these longer distance, Ruthie, that you're training for along the Bruce Trail. And of course I said yes. They got an RV and it was our like mobile aid station. But none of us had ever been to Tobermory or Lion's Head or run Tobermory to Lion's Head. So we didn't know what we were really in for. And we trusted John, who didn't exactly, like he had hiked it. He hadn't run it. So we had Tobermory to Lion's Head in like, I don't know, 10 to 14 hours or whatever it was. and with like a couple of stops along the way. But again, we didn't know what we were in for. And 54 kilometers had only been my longest run, and it ended up being like 80 something. Which, if you've been to Tope Memorial Lionshead, it's like, it's hike climb. Like, it's like a lot. Like, the run is crazy beautiful, but it's also very technical. And these guys they're a league of extraordinary trail runners. They just taught me what I needed to know in trail running and endurance. And honestly, learning how to trail run with them was learning how to run through the darkness and learning about my body and learning how to support my body and fuel it and everything else. And it was honestly like, and looking back now, it was honestly what I needed to get through what was coming next, which was my health and my cancer stuff. And I'm trying not to crack up and get too emotional here, but we did all of these segments along the Bruce Trail, and then cancer hit, and I was put into oncology. And the day before Christmas, I was told I had to go in for a radical hysterectomy and for cervical cancer. And I woke up in January in a room by myself in the dark, and I felt like there was 3 clocks on the wall, and you couldn't take anybody with you because of COVID. So this whole cancer journey was alone. And it was, you woke up in darkness, and I didn't know what the heck had happened. I partly, like, right before I went in for the surgery, I remember the surgeon, like, the healthcare system is so messed up. That's what people, I think, don't understand, that weren't in the hospital over COVID, is like how just burnt out and broken everything was. My doctors, like, there was residents at Sunnybrook, and they were on like rotations and stuff like that, and January was a turnover. So like, I had a different resident doctor I saw every time, and I was never sure if they knew who I was. But we got to the operative the day of the operation, and I'm sitting there all like hooked up, and they're reading your like chart and stuff, and they go through the plan, and the surgeon says that they're going to be removing my ovaries, and I'm like, you're going to put me in a medical menopause? And she's like, well, that's okay, you're 47. And I was like, no, I'm 36. And I remember just being like terrified, because you're like, you're restrained, you got like IVs and stuff everywhere, and they were like, no, you're not. And I was like, yeah. And the risks, if you don't know, for like Alzheimer's and a whole bunch of other things, they were saying 36 is the cusp, and like 36, 37. And they didn't realize, they didn't put 2 and 2 together. I don't know what was going on. Everything was just so confused for them, I guess. But she sat there with a pencil and a piece of paper and made me sign an alternate operative plan before I went under, which, when you're at their mercies and like restrained, you are terrified. That's the last thought you have, is I might have my ovaries, I might go into menopause. Are they going to take the right organs and parts away? But like, when I woke up from that, again, like, I was told it was going to be stitches, like a bikini line stitch, and I had staples running up my stomach, and I had no clue what they had taken out. And I just felt like Frankenstein, and there was nobody there. Nobody could come see you. Like, it was a very dark, dark place. And once I left the hospital, they sent me home with a staple remover and said, find a GP to take this out. Like, you're going to have to find support somewhere else. And I was like, I have no support. Like, what are you expecting me to do? Right. And I went back to my parents' house because I had to be immunocompromised and separated from people. And my body, which was this powerful engine that could run trails and like do ultras and stuff like that, shut down within 3 weeks. I had done a birthday run because I knew that my birthday was coming up, and like 2 weeks after surgery, and I was going to not be able to run it. So I did it before. So we ran 37K the night before, like 2 nights before surgery. And then everything just went dark. Like, when I woke up, and my body couldn't heal itself. My body shut down. And within 3 weeks, I was back in the hospital, and I went from 140 pounds to 110. And it couldn't figure out how to heal. And I couldn't figure out how to talk to people about what had happened. I couldn't figure out how to explain. There was no language to explain the darkness that I was in. And it was tough because everybody was used to this happy-go-lucky Ruthie. And looking back now, there was this one song that got stuck in my head that talked about doing life slowly. and taking time. And I realized that the people in my life did not know how to translate that version. They wanted a happy-go-lucky person. They wanted to see that strong and powerful girl that just bounced back. They wanted everything to happen at warp speed. And healing is a journey, and it doesn't happen overnight. And it doesn't happen at warp speed, because there's a physical component and a mental, a psychological component that you are dealing with. And it really, and it still does. Like, I mean, this is hard to talk to people about, because I was having a conversation with a girlfriend of mine who just had a hysterectomy too, without choice. And I was like, you wake up and it's like you live in the Matrix. It's like there's this world of people that you knew before you went under for surgery. And there's this new world that you, and new body that you have, that you're trying to like reconcile the two worlds together, but they're just not. And you go through the motions with the other world and stuff, but you're grieving pieces of you. Like for me, it was like physical pieces that had been removed. It was like my identity as a woman. It was like all these choices that I had no more choice over, and a body that like was failing itself. And like at one point it was like, I didn't know how to tell people this and to sit with it, because they'd never gone through it. And people were dealing with their own stuff in COVID. They were in over their head with emotions, and like to talk about other people's grief and trauma was just, nobody could hold space for. But I kept getting back to this place where I was like, I know I am loved, and I know that I can feel the people that love me. I just don't know how to get there. And it's very scary and humbling. But there was this image in my mind in the dark nights of just shuffling through the darkness. And I did this one race. My friends were like, they're all Tough Mudder Spartan Challenge racers, right? And over COVID, they did one at Joe Perry's, a friend of ours, house out in Wallaceburg. And they were like, you should try this. I was like, I can't do a chin-up. You think I'm going to be able to do a Tough Mudder? That's not going to happen. But they had like, the obstacles were ish obstacles, but it was running through the night along a dirt road. So like I put on a tutu and glow lights, and like my great trail runner friends were tired. So they all fell asleep. And I was like, they'll lap me when they wake up in the morning. Like I was totally like at peace with shuffling through the night. There was potholes. So I had this like headlamp on to just see the potholes. But it's this image of that night that we did that, of me shuffling in this tutu and looking down at these potholes and trying not to like sprain my ankle, and just moving through the night, not fast, but just like shuffling through the night. And then I look up all of a sudden and I turn my headlamp off, and there's this whole sea of stars above me that are just the most magical thing I had ever seen. And it was looking up to see those stars that I realized that I was never alone that night, that I could run through that night and never, ever be alone. And when they were still so cut off, it was like that night I could feel that they were there and loved me, but I was just surrounded by so much darkness and looking at those potholes. And I was like, you just got to keep shuffling, Ruthie, and realize that those stars are there and they're calling you back. So like, I mean, going through those dark nights and going through some of those tough races was like the fuel that I needed to understand what it meant to keep going. Oh, my favorite race. Sorry, to get off topic. This gets you to their favorite race. It was the 100-miler. So 100 and some odd days after that crazy surgery and waking up from that hospital, and then the recovery 3 weeks later that I lost all this weight and had to figure out like how to get back to running. Like people had sent me from Solomon this package of shoes and stuff, and I wanted to burn them all. Like, because you get to this place when like your healing journey is not moving forward, and you are so like in this pit where like I wanted to delete Strava and never talk to any runners again because people are all moving on and you are just stuck, right? It was a slow journey to like put shoes on and shuffle again. But like 100 and some odd days later, a friend of mine was like, I have osteoporosis, Ruthie, and this will be my last race. Do you want to come and do a 100-miler? And I was like, the farthest I've run is 80K, and that was the Tobermory Lions Head run. And I was like, this is Thursday. The race is on Saturday. Sure, why not? I better start drinking water now and hydrating before this. But I didn't know what it was in for. And I just grabbed trail shoes and said yes, right? Like when somebody invites you to an adventure, yes, that is the answer, because it's probably going to change your life. You might not finish it, but that doesn't matter. You're going to learn stuff along the way. So I said yes, and we went to this race. And it was a whole like night. Like I was supposed to do that 100K race after the 50. After Christy, we said we were going to do the 100, and then COVID hit, and we never actually ran the 100K that whole year. Cancer and everything. I think that was the biggest setback for me mentally, was the fact that I never got my goal for that year of running 100K in, because cancer took so much away from me and my body just couldn't support it. So like I was looking forward to this idea that even if I don't do 160 or whatever that 100-mile is, I'll still maybe get my 100. So like my fingers were crossed for this. And so we just started running, and it was a gorgeous race. Her and I talked and sang. That's the other fun thing about me. If you ever go trail running with me, I have Disney princess songs and a whole playlist of epic music from people over cancer that couldn't. They always say the wrong things. Well, not intentionally, but people don't know what to do or what to say. And it got to the point where I was like, just send me music, because the words and the songs of hope, like just, they were like, put this on your playlist and go, when you go for runs, just listen and know that you're loved. And it totally helps. So we played music the whole time, her and I, and my friends that were supposed to run the 100K showed up and were like, we're going to come and pace you over your 100K limit. So in the middle of the night, like these friends of mine came with us and like ran us through our 100K mark just over that race. And then the beauty of it was Steph and I stood on podiums together, and we made this awesome memory. Like I didn't go to this race thinking I was going to stand on a podium. I just was like, we're just going to get her done. We got 24 hours, and then under 24 hours, we finished the race. And it was just a beautiful like testament of just like going and just keep going. And with the power of like together, when you have people that show up and be brave with you, the things that you're capable of doing is just like astronomical, right? And again, like that, those themes happened at Welland again with Alistair, who got me to the end of that line. And my friend Jamie, like that was the other thing. My friend Jamie showed up. He runs a running group with Traveling Circus. Again, Jamie and I have only met each other a couple times. He showed up for one of my 100-mile races with my friend John. But he showed up at Welland, and it was his first triathlon race too, like long course. He's like, I've only ever swam 750 meters before this, but 2K isn't that much. Like the lady had told us it was a bit more than 2K. So the way they stuck to the course, I was like, don't worry, Jamie, we got wetsuits, we'll be fine. And like, he was like, I heard that you were jumping into this and you can't have all the fun, Ruthie. So he too, like jumped into a race, and he's like, braver together. Like that's the deal. Like he totally smoked me though, because he's a Boston runner. That guy is amazing. But I was like, your legs don't forget when you get on the bike. You just got to trust your legs. The swim is the part that you got to be a little precautious about. But I mean, it was just amazing because he finished, we got to the finish line, and Jamie was like there right at the finish line. And he was the first person I saw, and gave him a big hug and was so grateful. Because those people that come back, and the universe just reminds you that you're not alone, and that, that the people at these races are meant to be. And it's like, it's beautiful, like a beautiful serendipitous moment. Like my body didn't die. Right. And and that was the other thing I kept saying, there'll be a time when I won't be able to do this, and that's not today. And just keep going. Like the most you can do is jump in and try something. And if you don't finish, you don't finish, but it's rarely the case because you walk away with all the learning too, right? So
absolutely.
So yeah, so no, my favorite race was definitely not Sticks and Stones, the Tally in the Valley with Happy Trails. However, Welland is a close second. And I'm getting in, like it literally was like, and don't laugh, my triathlon medal is in my car hanging off my stick shift.
Beautiful.
Because I'm like, I'm a triathlete. Like Jamie and I stood there for like moments at the end, and I was like, what have we just done? Like we've entered a new world, my friend. So yeah, so I mean, like I've been grateful. for like just jumping into the tri world and having people. I find the triathlon world too, with people that are humble and kind enough to hold space for that learning journey. When you find groups of people like that let you practice and let you like don't make you feel less of a human for trying.
Absolutely.
And those are
I've
the
done that myself. Like,
yeah.
it could be the complete novice or the most
Uh-oh. I think
seasoned
you
pro in the
paused.
world.
You there?
Everybody is together. Yep. Can you hear me?
Oh yeah, now I can. Sorry.
Yeah. So I was just saying, it's funny when it comes to the tri community. It can be a novice or the most seasoned pro, and everybody's running on the same course at the same time, and they're not ashamed to share any knowledge. It's a community, and it feels like a family sometimes.
Yeah. And I think that like, and this was, after having a chat with you after Welland, because I had a lot of people there's a lot of people in my life, and even athletes in my life, and even a coach in my life that are very skeptical about me still being in treatment, and being able to do races and stuff like that. And I think a lot of those comments go back to their relationship with sports and not mine. And I've had to separate those two because I have a different relationship with my body, and the reasons and my relationships with sports and doing triathlon races and stuff is different. Like, I remember in one of my texts, I said, look, you're going to have athletes that you train that are way more able-bodied than I am, that probably listen to your training plans way better than I do. And they're going to stand on podiums and have these epic race retells. However, when I get to my Iron half that I'm going to do in 4 weeks and I pass that finish line, it's going to be a story, and it's going to be a race adventure, and it's going to be a story about, pushing myself and not believing that I am just the number and the data that my blood work says, or that my oncologist talks about average and the majority and all these words that they kind of chalk you up to, and forget that you are the sum of your parts, and those parts are all different, right? And I had to really go through that mental process of separating that, because I got a concussion last year, the year before, while I was trail running. And I went through the process of going, I had a really good chiropractor that works with concussions for the elite NHL people. I don't know how I ended up scoring him, but he got me back to trail running within 5 weeks. But I remember getting there and having a conversation with him because he was trying to source out a bunch of my medical stuff. And we talked about menopause, and because of what happened, they did save my ovaries, by the way. But to know whether or not there's hormonal imbalance, because as a female athlete, the more you train, the more it affects your hormones, right? And it's like that outlier that nobody really knows what to do with, right? So like me talking to women about menopause and like how you would know as an athlete, like the women that are in my situation are rare. Like, people under 40 that have like questions about menopause, don't ask other women under 40. Nobody knows what you're experiencing, right? And like the women that are in the age bracket for menopause might not be like doing the same things. Like, I remember sitting down at school with a bunch of older teachers, and they were just like, well, like, that's just it. Like, you shouldn't be exercising so much. And I was like, well, that's not the answer either. Like, I've got a bunch of unique parts to me that are like unique questions, but you can't just put an umbrella statement on all of it and just say that's it, right? And I found that with training, it's a lot like that as well. Like, there's not a one answer to any of this, right? And not one coach or one training partner is going to be the whole package, right? So like with my swimming and stuff like that, I've spent my swimming in the pool with a bunch of older women and just swam in the slow lane with them just to learn technique, right? And I was saying yesterday, the bike, I ended up on my longest bike ride. Can't laugh. My longest bike ride ever was 93K. You have to understand, Monday's bike ride was like 67K, and that was the longest. And then we did 93, but I did it with all these older gentlemen that are like the age groupers and 75, like Bob Nucky, who is like Canada's like super Ironman. He agreed to take me out, and I called them the Lost Boys because they are like crazy fit for 75. I was like, when I grow up, I want to be like you, Bob, because you are awesome. But they were just so humble and kind enough. So as we were biking those 93K, they were showing me how to like, Hans was showing me how to like tilt your foot like this to go up hills and like, you know, power from A, B, C, or D, or like, you know, it's not necessary after you are going a speed, if you're going a speed that's slower than 24K or 24 kilometers an hour or whatever, right? And I was like, Hans, I have no clue what this means. I have no clue about bike speed. So you could tell me all these numbers. Understanding of what 24 kilometers feels like to whatever. And like to the point where like I didn't even know that with bike speed, the faster you go, like the bigger the number, the faster you're going. I thought these bigger numbers meant I was going slower. So I'd be looking at my Strava data and being like, Ruthie, you're actually going slower on these longer rides. But no, because in running, it's like your bigger number is your slower distance. So if I was going 6 kilometers, like I was doing a 6-minute pace, it would mean that I'd be going slower. Whereas in biking, 24, it's faster than 23, right? So like all this stuff is so new, but like having these older gentlemen there and these older, wiser athletes to just come and hold feel judged for what you're doing. Do you know what I mean?
Absolutely.
But yeah, I don't know. I think everybody has like people that they go and train with and stuff like that. And sometimes they're your best friends, but sometimes it's the most unpredictable people that you find along the way that are the ones that like, you know, are the best people to motivate you because they understand what it means to try and to learn something at a different rate and a different pace. And they kind of accept you for who you are and where you're at, which is like that experience in life. So, but they're still crazy. Like, again, when I get to be 75, I want to be like them. I was like, you guys are just living life. You're retired and all you do is train for Ironmans. I was like, this is pretty impressive. Like, you go out for a ride all together and, you know, you all have fun and come back happier versions of yourself. That's the kind of like life I want to live.
So talking about learning, you've faced a lot of adversity. You've learned how to run in the dark.
Yeah.
If you had to say what the greatest gift of your diagnosis was, the greatest teaching personally, how would you encapsulate that?
Oh, that's a hard one. I really believe maybe two things. One, that everything happens for a reason. And sometimes those reasons really do suck. They seem to suck at the time, but they do happen for a reason. That's number one. And that's because like over COVID, when I was first diagnosed, and all the biopsy shut down, it shut down from January. Like I got a letter in the mail that literally said, you've got cervical cancer and now you got to wait for a biopsy. And I had to wait till September, October to get that biopsy done because nobody was taking in. So I knew I had cancer. I was trying not to Google it. But during that time for me, I learned how to trail run. Number one, I learned how to run in the darkness, as I said. Number two, but also what happened in the medical industry or the medical field in the healthcare was that research took off. So when everybody was shut down and couldn't like do lab work and stuff like that, and we're like, you know, running around like chickens with their heads cut off, like that's not an insult. I just mean like it was so chaos in the healthcare. A lot of research took off in the procedures on how to do things. So for me, what that looked like was that my cancer, which is a rare form of cancer, it's actually Henrietta lacks the HeLa cells that we do all our research on. that's the kind of cervical cancer I had. And it's a fast growing cancer, but nobody really knows a lot about it. And what happened was they started doing more research studies and publishing these research studies that were like just not finished on the procedures on how they did it. So if I would have gone in January, it would have been chemo and radiation. In fact, one of my girlfriends, she's the only other person I know that's ever had this cancer, and she died from it in like 3 years. And it was like 8 years ago, and she had chemo, bouts of chemo radiation. They didn't do the hysterectomy. So the procedure changed by the time I got to oncology to do hysterectomy, which they say changes that is a game changer. Like, because once they take it out, you can't, like your woman parts, it doesn't spread as much. So which is good because like there's more hope, there's more potential there, right? And if I would have got everything done when I needed to, or when I wanted it done, I would have had probably a whole different outcome, right? Because like it would have been too late. So I think number one, that everything happens for a reason. I learned how to run through the dark. I learned how to set myself up for this hysterectomy. Even the crappy things that happened, like my parents moved away to Calgary 3 months after I got out of surgery and stuff like that. And it was like a whole other level of grieving. But that grief got turned in, and that processing and that like going through that turned into like fuel to get into sports. Like when I was going through those dark times, what my way of processing it was to go and cry along the Bruce Trail to the trees. My kids, I have 2 little boys. Well, they're not little anymore. They're 12 and 9. My 12-year-old's bigger than me. But they knew that when mom was gone running and when mom goes to train, she goes to cry to the trees along the Bruce Trail. And the Bruce Trail became sanctuary to me. And it wasn't about explaining these emotions because I don't understand what they are half the time either. Sometimes tears just come, right? Sometimes our body just processes these big emotions that we don't have language for. Not at 9, not at 12, not at 39, right? And that's okay. But we're still allowed to get those emotions out. So my kids knew and started learning about what empathy was at a very young age. So like, if I wouldn't have gone through a lot of this, my kids wouldn't have had this understanding of what it means to be healthy mentally and physically, and kind of how to deal with those emotions in a real way, in a way that's healthy, in a way that's like brings you back to joy. Because I'd go for those runs, let all the tears out, be grateful that we live in a province that has such beautiful trails and beautiful places and like sanctuaries to go and cry. And a body, I'd come back with the understanding that I had a body that could support a run like that. And a body that despite what my blood work said, despite what the test said, was still functioning and still telling me to like keep moving and keep going. So yes, everything happens for a reason is probably like the one thing. And then the other thing I would definitely say is that you are more, want more out of your life, and you are more than like what people tell you, the limits that people set for you. And just kind of those like standards of this is how things should be. And that like, not just knowing you're more, but wanting more out of life. So 3 weeks before Welland, signing up for Welland, it was literally like, story sucked. My health sucked. I was in the middle of treatment again. And I was like, I'm back in this hole and I have one of 2 options. I can either stay in Broke Down Palace, which is really not an option, or you can go and write a better story. And that's exactly what I did. Was I wrote a better story. I realized that time is the most precious commodity we have. And to go spend the time I have at being parts of other people's epic stories and writing my own. So I think that until you go through something in life that kind of shakes you and brings you down to your bare bones, you don't understand what gratitude is to the nth degree. And like going through Welland and even signing up for this Ironman, it's not about podium finishing. And even my training, it's not about podium finishing. It's about having a healthy body and being grateful for the people that have been part of that journey and part of that story, because those are what I leave for my two boys. And those are what I like leave for the people that are in your wake, that are hearing these stories and needing, just like you said at the beginning, that push to say, why not me? Like, why not me? Why can't I do this? Like, that was the one other story. Sorry, I'm off on rabbit trails for you today. I'm so sorry.
Take your time.
So the other thing I did while I was on break and off, like, again, like, I am a teacher, a kindergarten teacher, and everybody thought that 6 weeks I would be on short-term leave and then right back, right? Like, I would be back to teaching because that's how I define myself. And it was almost 2 years that it took me to get back. And this year has been the first year, like till June was my first year back. And it was the hardest thing. Like, you think triathlons are hard, going back to teaching after you've gone through a leave or an illness or whatever was crazy hard. It's like, I knew it was something I was passionate about, but it was hard. But while I was off, all of the funding, like, you have like coverage and healthcare coverage and stuff, all of that just blew up. Like, LTD had a cyber attack, so they were gone for 6 months. So I had no income. Like, and then once it came back, like, it was a series of crazy, unfortunate events because of COVID, but it was like one after another, where you were just like, this is insane. And I really questioned whether I should still be off, but I was like, no, mentally, Ruthie, you're not ready yet. So, like, during the time off, I actually spent time running these trails, like I said, to like kind of help me with the grieving process of things and to go cry to the trees and stuff. And one of the things I did that that I was very passionate about was I started working with a bunch of my female friends, setting FKTs, which are fastest known time records, along the Bruce Trail, because there aren't any. So there's the male segments that all have like male trail runners that have set these fastest known time records for the sections, but the women, there was just one. And it was actually from a friend of mine in Niagara. And I remember looking at her finishing it, and she's older than me. Her name is Erin and Catherine, and they're great trail runners. I've run with them before, but Erin had said something to me that inspired me to continue this. And it was the fact that it's not about finishing it. It's about just getting it on there, because women need to be represented in sport. And she's just like, the purpose of me doing this is so that when women look it up, they say, I could beat that. That's possible, right? And I remember looking at that thinking, that is incredible. I live in Caledon. There's a Caledon section. Why not try this? So I had actually went for a biopsy, had stitches in my legs. And the next day I ran the whole Caledon section. I talked to hikers along the way. It wasn't pretty, but I got it done, 70K, right? And I said, like, I made a post, and I was like, women, we just got to start setting these records, and I will support anybody. So I spent my time off on the weekends supporting women to set these records along the Bruce Trail in the different sections. And I was like, trail runners that didn't believe it was possible or were scared of running in the dark alone, I was like, I'll show you how to set up drop bags. We need to be on here. And like, the fact of the matter is it doesn't have to be pretty. It just has to be done. And you have to have somebody that like believes in you and nudges you to that for it to get done. But it does get done. And when it does get done, like, magical things happen. Like, Chantel Damaris has come up and started to take the sections away this year by racing them. And I'm like, it's not about feeling sad that your record's taken away. It's feeling excited that women are seeing potential and saying, you know, if she can do it, why not me, right? And that's how we all become better. So, yeah. So, I mean, I really feel like in sports, especially with women, like encouraging each other and like getting out there, but like also realizing that there isn't one body type or one, like, you know, expert, like well-chiseled frame that will get you to the end, right? It's your mental place. And if you've got the mental capacity to keep going and to realize that you are more, you get to the finish line, and it's an epic story. And I think that we need more of these epic stories in the world, because it keeps us all going. Right? Like, I love to live in a world where those were the stories that we all listened to.
Well, you have an epic story yourself.
Yeah. I mean, we're making. This is
Make
what I
it,
say
make
to
it.
my boys. I say to my boys, it's not a finished story. I'm like, I'm learning to be your mother. You were teaching me how to be your parent. And that's a journey that changes every time you guys grow up. But yeah, no, it's not a finished story. And we're all works in progress, right? And I kind of like to
Absolutely.
think that together we're part of a bigger narrative about humanity and, crazy triathlons, right? I'm still so grateful, Daniel, that you hosted about Muskoka. Like, I can't tell you enough that it was going through the social media feed and being like, Daniel signed up for this and did it. It's not that scary. Like, I saw him at the end of Welland and he was like, we had the bike rack, right? You were like still processing 1,000 things, but you weren't scared. Like, that was one emotion I didn't see at the end. And I was like, Daniel just did Welland and then he just did Ironman. And I was like, he lives life fearlessly. And he's like, if Daniel can live fearlessly, there's no excuse for you not to. I was like, you're just going to sign up and you're going to learn. And that was just it. Like, it's not about achieving a training plan before I get there. That would be nice. But, it's just watching these incredible humans, these leagues of incredible humans that just say yes more in life and trust that it's a journey and not just a podium finish. You know what I mean?
Absolutely.
So I'm grateful.
You're one of those incredible humans. And again, I just want to thank you very, very sincerely. Your strength and resilience in the face of this adversity, it's truly inspiring to everyone. I want to wish you good luck in your continued training.
Yeah.
I want to keep in touch with you and get updates constantly. And I'm going to wait for your your feed with holding up the Ironman Tremblant medal.
Yeah.
Yep.
I have to put it on my car, the new gear shift. Okay. When I finished my 100 miler, that the buckle, I carried around in my purse because I don't have pants. Like, they give you belt buckles when you do 100 milers. It's not pretty. They're belt buckles to say you did it. And I don't wear buckle pants. So, like, and even if I did, they probably fall down because that thing weighs a lot. So I carried it in my purse. It's actually still there. But it's just that accomplishment that you did something cool, right? So, but yeah, no. So my triathlon medal is like the new belt buckle. And when I get to Ironman, there'll have to be another one. But yeah, grateful that for all of these stories because they just make us better humans.
And thank you for sharing yours today.
Yeah, awesome. Thanks for
Thank
inviting
you,
me.
Ruthie. I
Right.
look forward to staying in touch with you.
Okay, thanks.
Thank you so much.
Later.
Have a good day.
Bye.
Bye bye.